Ebusia mo bi akwa ba se mu ransom ma ye Kojo Oppong Nkrumah ekopie mo Kwesi Pratt show so talk time with Kwesi Pratt no kopie me nyina Kwesi Pratt show ni so obisa the hard questions na Kojo Oppong Nkrumah kopie wo ho no and Kwesi Pratt ebusa ne say Nansen, you have been moving from one radio station to the another, claiming say President Mahama I say we are appointing only 60 ministers, but we actually are appointing a lot of NDC members at Kogu Flagstaff House. I want to claim say a lot of MPP members go of NDC members or Flagstaff House. In essence, no, President Mahama enkate cost, but he just pretending say 60 ministers and we are appointing. We are not saying. Now, you bet no video no I'm able to how I see Kojo Oppong Nkrumah struggle to answer. Orion was how the board is be say cocaine now must say befa Kotoka International Airport no airmed cocaine now must say befa Kotoka International Airport no. I must say more evidence in team for also more evidence no more evidence now more no e wo hin means you be am kwa how Kojo Oppong Nkrumah fumble to answer Kwesi Pratt tough questions no mo Kwesi Pratt, talk time with Kwesi Pratt.
We're going to be looking at the last 3 months. What has happened, the good and the bad, or maybe the bad. And we are very, very privileged to have in our studio Honorable Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, former Minister of Information and Member of Parliament. So you're welcome to our studio.
Thank you very much, Kwesi, for having me.
Well, I've been trying to get you for a long time.
I know.
I've been
running up and down.
Good to have you.
My pleasure to be here.
How do you see the last 3 months?
I think it's a mixed bag. There are some things that are notable in the positive sense, and then there are also some very worrying signs. Generally, in the first 3 months of an administration, when there's a lot of goodwill, when there's a lot of political capital, you see the administration trying to yes, fulfill some of its major promises and also do some of the most difficult things. And I think you see that that's what this government has been trying to do. And some of those things look positive, but there are also, as I mentioned, some very worrying trends that I'm sure as we have some more time we'll discuss, but it's a mixed bag.
In your view, what are some of the promises we have been kept?
I think one of the first ones is the composition of government. You would recall that getting to the 2024 election, the view generally was that that is not true. So first of all, if you look at the Office of Government Machinery, the compensation budget used to be about 327 million. And at the time, the rhetoric from the NDC was that that was way too high. And I recall my friends, Blakwa, etc., doing lots of press conferences about the fact that 327 million as compared to the other sectors of government was overbearing. Today, the government tells us that they are reducing the number of ministers. And as I mentioned, in effect, the end effect should be that the expenditure should reduce. Now, the first time we challenged that was not true, we said what they have done is that they've just shifted the cost elsewhere. They haven't really cut. And I remember Felix Kwachifosu, Minister for Government Communications, challenging me in Parliament and saying that that is not true. And that, for example, the 76 people who used to work at my former ministry, Information Ministry, no longer work there, etc. And we explained to them that no, you've only moved them to other ministries. You haven't dismissed them as civil servants. And you have also only moved the cost of the agency somewhere else. When the numbers come, we'll find out. Eventually, when the numbers came, the budget for the Office of Government Machinery has moved from 327 million to 2.7 billion. That's over 720% increase. Now, when you ask for the details, then they say, oh, for example, the GBC, JNAISD budget were moved. But I thought you said you had cut them. Then, for example, they say the civil servants that are associated with those ones, that is the compensation for them. So it is either not true that you have cut those expenses or true that this has been inflated. Now, they make the argument that it's because now national security is no longer a ministry and has been brought there, so that's inflated. Now, if you take the national security budget of about 1.2 billion and you add the original about 327, that's about 1.5 billion. And then you even jack it up by some 10-15%. you are getting close to about 1.7 billion. There's an extra 1 billion that has brought it to about 2.7 billion. And we asked them to provide the data. So data, for example, haven't heard those explanations. But even more instructively, the total government expenditure when we claimed government was too large was about 250 billion. Now that we were talking about cutting expenditure, not just from the Office of Government Machinery and from the number of ministers, but generally in the budget, it's gone to 290 billion. If you look at it in real terms, it used to be about 18% of GDP. Now it's gone up to, I think, about 20% of GDP. So whichever way you look at it, you can't square that circle. And that's why we've been telling our colleagues that the rhetoric has been good. In fact, even the optics have looked good, but the numbers beneath don't support that rhetoric.
Let's go back to your era. GBC certainly was not under the presidency.
No.
Its remuneration was not under the presidency. Ghana News Agency was not there. ISD was not there. And then the research department was not there. Okay. So that's an addition to whatever was spent in the presidency for remuneration. Isn't that the case?
That is so. But that is why in the cumulative figures, if you indeed claim that you have had a cut, it must reflect somewhere in the cumulative figures. Because initially we told you that you haven't cut, you have only shifted the budget. And you said, no, you have cut. Okay. So now when the numbers come, we should either see a cut here or a cut in the cumulative. We are not seeing a cut on the top side. When we ask you, see, it's because you moved ISD, GBC, GNA, research here. That's why we are not seeing the cut. We say fair and good. How about the cumulative? Because we are not seeing a cumulative cut. For example, now at the Jubilee House, they've appointed a number of former party officials to assist the regional ministers in some sort of coordination, but they are not named as deputy ministers. They will be compensated. There's some build-up in one of the expenditure lines to compensate them. For example, at the Office of the President, in fact, the Office of the President directly, if you look at the number of, let's say, deputy chiefs of staff that we haven't necessarily seen a significant cut in those. To the realities of the financial situation, you will see a lot of gaps. So, for example, in Parliament, I was drawing their attention that if you look at their manifesto and you look at the first economic policy they've brought, there's so much incoherence because the manifesto is way out on the extreme side, promising some drastic turn. But the reality is hitting them in the first economic policy they've had to put on the table, partly because of the fact that you are getting to the tail end of curing a particular challenge that you had. You are still a convalescent getting out of it. And so you cannot find all of that financing and resourcing to do all of these things. So you have a challenge here. Something has got to give. That's number one. Number two is the fact that even the curing process, you are beginning to undermine it, I argue, for political reasons. So we measure the health of an economy based on some parameters. The government is repeating the mistake that successive governments have made, which is the politics of trying so hard to bastardize previous administrations. And in so doing, trying to infuse some numbers that suggest that our problem is worse than it is. That is actually going to create a bigger gap between where you are and the promises that you have made. And we have suggested to the administration that that is not helpful to their own cause because it's not even sustainable. And it is a practice that we have to move away from. So a drastic turnaround in the economy, I don't think it is going to be occasioned anytime soon. Now, additionally, some of the policy interventions that the government is following today, and for me particularly on two areas. One is on the cost of living, which always comes down to bite every administration. That's what people measure, the bread and butter cost of living issues. If you look at this government's framework for managing cost of living, it is going to get worse. That is one. And then number two, the structure of the Ghanaian economy. You don't see any clear interventions to turn around the structure of the economy. And so if you look at what they call the value drivers in these two areas, and you look at what they've promised and look at where we are, it doesn't appear to me that in this 4-year period, we're going to have a drastic turnaround of the economy.
You appear to be challenging some figures that the government has put out without mentioning them. What are these figures?
So take, for example, in particular, our deficit on a commitment basis. And let me bring in the IMF. The IMF and the government of Ghana agreed on a framework for calculating our national accounts. and on a definition of specific items. One of the items being arrears. And we have a specific definition for arrears. This government...
Arrears in terms of what?
Arrears in terms of obligations that financial obligations on government that are due for payment, which government has not serviced. So...
You're talking about debt payments?
Not debt, well, debt broadly, but not specifically borrowings that we have to pay. So you've given commitments to contractors, etc. When they fall due and they are processed and keyed into gift miss, they are considered as arrears that have to be paid. And over the period, the government of Ghana has had arrears. So what happens is that every time we program the budget, we also program a certain part of expenditure to clear arrears. So that expenditure will not necessarily come back into the real economy. It goes to pay old commitments. So we have a definition for it. This government, for example, in trying to keep with the political narrative that the economy has been criminally managed and it's a crime scene, now came up with a figure of 49 billion Ghana cedis of arrears, which they have used to adjust the deficit on a commitment basis. And therefore, that reality, yes, it is the case that at every point in time, there will be some commitments that are yet to go through the process and come to the center. But that is why there's a clear definition of how those commitments are admitted, validated, and therefore included and programmed over a medium term. So if you don't do that, and for political expediency reasons, you send a notice round to ministries saying that every ministry who has a commitment, send us the number, and you total 49 billion and proceed to adjust commitments, deficit, and primary balance with this, you are shooting yourself in the foot. The moment they did that, you saw that our yields on the global bond markets began to uptick by about 200 basis points. You also saw that even in the medium-term expenditure framework, they could not program how to pay 49 billion. So they were beginning to expose themselves, and that's why we're saying that don't compound your problem. You are getting out of a
difficult... that you're not contesting the figure.
No, we are contesting the figure.
The process.
No, we are contesting the figure.
So what's the real figure there?
Well, they have to audit. You see, you cannot come up with a figure that is not audited, because that will be a phantom figure. You have to go through a process of auditing those figures. And then when you audit and you know what the real figures are, you program over a medium term. The government cannot
so
just...
you don't also know the real figures.
And they don't know as well. What they have done is that they have come to Parliament to say that they have been told it's 49 billion and they are going to audit it. However, they have gone ahead to adjust their accounts as at 31st December by deducting that 14. Nobody does that. And that's why we are drawing the attention that don't shoot yourself in the foot. Do the numbers and you will find what the real numbers are and program them over a medium term period.
But for what you're saying, they use the method. They use the method. Except that you disagree with the method.
Because
the method was to add up the general indebtedness of all the ministries, agencies, and so on. Because
that method is unknown, unheard of in any national accounting. Even the IMF formula that was agreed and signed in the extended credit facility does not approve of that formula. We will be surprised if the IMF acquiesces to that sort of national accounting that they have done. And we've drawn the attention of the fund that this is the formula. We all know the formula. We cannot allow the government to, do this kind of what they call autonomics. Just play with it like that. No, it doesn't portend well for us.
Now, beyond this question of arrears and so on, are there any other problems so far you've seen?
Where the government is spending its money. You have followed national, political economics for decades. If a government does not prioritize properly and spend its money in the right areas, you will spend a lot of money. Sometimes even a lot of that money will leave the jurisdiction. You spend a lot of that money will not translate into growth, development, jobs and incomes for people. If you look at the economic program, the first of the 4 economic programs that they've put before Parliament, you will struggle to see where government wants to spend money on productive ventures in a substantial way that translates into growth and expansion of the economy. The closest we have heard is their Feed Ghana program, their Greek for Economic Transformation agenda also. We have been told that we bequeathed in December 2024. And those are some of the things that we worry about when it comes to the economic space, because the pressures are real, but the responses don't seem strong enough.
Now here's the government who says that we came into office and there was a huge hole in national finances. We simply don't have the money to spend.
We cannot take that hook, line, and sinker from the government. The reason is this. No political group should be allowed to get away with this excuse that when I was making my promises, I didn't know. That's one. And I'll explain why. No political group should be allowed to say, I'm looking for power, I get power, but the problem is so big that I can't put on the table credible solutions to move us to the next level. Now, to explain these two arguments, in Parliament, we have access to all of the data. And unless, as a parliamentary group, you acquiesce or sleep on your rights, you will have every single information that you need to allow the political group to understand the way things are, based on which you will make your promises. And I'll give you an example. In 2024 April, I was invited by Dr. Baumia to be vice chair of our manifesto committee. The manifesto committee was not exactly government, so we had so many other people. When the committee started work and needed information, we summoned information from Parliament and many other places and began to model. I know colleagues on the NDC side who were on their finance subcommittee for their manifesto purposes, and they also were modeling. In that modeling, both parties said we're going to take away betting tax, e-levy, COVID levy. And when we modeled it, it was about 6 to 7 billion cedis a year. They modeled it as what they knew. So we both knew that if you take these taxes off, this is the fiscal hole that you are going to encounter. And we both tried to answer the question, how do you close that hole? We came up with answers, they came up with answers. So now when you come to power, and you now have the opportunity to put it into practice, you should not be allowed to get away with this thing where you say, I didn't know there was such a hole. You knew, or you had all reasonable information that if you put together, you would know. And it is based on that you made your promises. When you were promising to set up, in fact, there's a classical example, supporting women in trade. And it's one of the few times I've seen the two parties have policy disagreements. Dr. Baumia said, we cannot build a bank for women, because you need 400 million cedis capitalization. Even if you are setting up 16 branches across the country, the OPEX before the float for lending, then under Act 930, you need to have a certain category of directors. You can't do it. So let's create a fund. Even if you start by 200 million or 100 million a year, then make it available to the savings and loans and microfinance companies to lend to. That's how you answer the problem. Our colleagues on the NDC looked at the same problem and said, we're going to set up a bank. And when we challenged it during the small debates that we had, they said, today the debt to GDP ratio is about 61.8%. The NDC, when they were leaving power, before rebasing, left us about 75%. So in actual terms, they left us a higher indebted country than we have left them.
Those are contentious issues.
No, they are not. Those are the numbers.
They've been contested seriously.
No, those are the numbers.
Okay.
They are the numbers, not my numbers. These are the numbers from the Bank of Ghana, from the Ghana Fiscal Service. They are not my numbers. And I'm saying that the numbers show that they left us a higher indebted country than we have left them, despite the fact that this country is indebted, both areas. However, when they left us 75%, we, for example, the first 3 years, we cut about 17 taxes away. We grew tax to GDP ratio from 11 to 13%. And because of the interventions we introduced to put money in productive sectors, agric and industry in particular, and then telecom services, we're able to grow the economy, average 7% in the first 3 years. If you compare to what we have bequeathed to them and how they are handling it, and the fact that they are not putting money in those places, that is why you see that their growth is not going, or is not programmed to go as fast as ours was going. Our modeling, this economy has the potential to do about 8% this year. But it is because they are not funding those things that will translate into growth and jobs for people. And that is what we are drawing their attention to, that they still have time. To be honest with you, if they mess up politically, we are happy. But it doesn't work for Ghana. And it is in our collective interest that we don't rewind the clock on some of those key interventions.
Is it true that you left office at the time when debt servicing and debt repayment had been suspended?
That is true.
That has never happened for a long time in our history.
Again, that is true.
So how do you blame them if you left them with this situation?
Well, I'm saying
now,
to you
now
that
they are under obligation to service debt and to pay debts. That takes away substantial resources.
We were under obligation to also service debts. You recall that when we came to power, one of the first transactions that Ken Ofori-Atta did that, was whipped up as something negative was the Franklin Templeton transaction.
Sure.
About $2.8 billion cedi equivalent to getting some liquidity to start servicing debts and making liquidity available to the government. There has not been a scenario where any government has inherited the reins of power where there is an abundance of resources for you to work with. You have to mobilize the resources, but you have to be efficient in how you apply those resources in the priority areas. They had to do it in 2009. You will recall Dr. Kobna Dufour's letter to the IMF in 2009. We had to do it in 2017. They still have to do it. Those are common threads that cut through.
What I recall
is
the IMF's letter
of the people. And after a while, the people are like, yeah, Nkrumah, so what? And actually, even since we came back, I was very young when President Kufuor, came to power. Spent a lot of time blaming the Rawlings era. After a while, people were like, but that's why Rawlings era is gone and we didn't vote for males. Deliver. So you saw in the 2004 election, it was a tightrope for us. 2009, the NDC came, spent a lot of time trying to blame President Kufuor. Kufuor did this, Kufuor. After a while, people were like, this is not why we voted for you. When we came to power, I was information minister. And I keep saying that we will admit our mistakes openly. We spent an awful lot of time blaming the Mills Mahama administration for it. After a while, the Ghanaians were like, it doesn't give me a job if you keep blaming Mills Mahama. That's why we voted against them. So fix it. Give me the job, get cost of living down. And we are seeing that haven't learned these lessons. We are drawing their attention that don't waste your time doing that one. The people have passed that verdict already. Get on with the work.
Obviously, we're taking a short break. And when we come back, we'll be moving away from economics to other areas that...
Specifically within administrations, I think we have also done well. Particularly when this administration started, there appeared to be the desire to have a more convivial atmosphere, more collaborative one. Talk of the National Economic Dialogue, for example. We were of the view that you didn't need a National Economic Dialogue if what you wanted to do was to find the true state of the economy, because the data on the true state of the economy was available. But of course, if you wanted a platform for people to continuously talk about the economy, we did the National Policy Summits. So if you are doing National Economic Dialogue, there's nothing wrong with it. Then there was a National Education Forum. Things like that were good, bringing more views together. But it appears that almost immediately after that window, we're getting into this period where government wants to intimidate and oppress and cow people who are having some dissenting voices into submission. I mean, this week we are dealing with the press conference from the minority, raising a number of issues that we're asking government to hold a full public inquiry on. And it appears that the government's interest is in teaching the person who raised it a lesson. You've had incidents now where you wake up in the morning and your house has been raided by, national security operatives. And if even after that, there's an indictment of some sort and you are hearing that, okay, when we went to Addison's house, this is what we found and therefore so and so and so, you could see it as an isolated law enforcement episode. But you are beginning to see a pattern of these raids going on, people's CCTVs being removed, that we heard there was this, we heard there was that, and nothing consequential coming out of those. And so I sense that the atmosphere is beginning to change, and we are beginning to drift away from what appeared to be the initial convivial atmosphere. And this is my theory. There are two things I see. If you listen to the chatter, those that some may describe as the hawks in the NDC have been literally warning the president that we're not going to do a father for all thing like Mills did. And it appears that they are either the ones engineering or maybe doing on a frolic of their own some of these things. It also appears that some, may I say, junior level officers are having a higher hand, so that even when the president gives an instruction that, okay, I want this matter investigated, they can come out and say, no, we don't even need that investigation, this matter. We have the information, we'll put the information out, and the person who said it will teach him a lesson. We'll make a scapegoat out of him. And actually, subsequent to that, yesterday, for example, you see BNI officers, gun wielding all over the place. And it brings back some worrying nostalgia of our pre-democratic or pre-Fourth Republic, let me say, days. So if I was sum that up, I would say the atmosphere appeared to start well. I have worries that it's deteriorating very soon, and I think that the president and his top advisors should rein it in.
You appear to say that the attempted arrest of Honorable Ntim Kojo is an indication of that deterioration.
Because it follows a certain pattern of raids here, raids there, and even rhetoric that said that they were going to intimidate him. Because if you listen to what my good friend Felix Kwachifosu addressed on Ekosi, saying on the 3rd of April, 2 days after the president had called for proper investigation, he said those investigations are not necessary. They had information, and that they were going to put out that information. And if you look at the insults and the vitriol spewed at the minority under Order 24.3 of our standing orders, when a member of parliament, as part of his parliamentary duties, even says something that you are not happy about, there are remedies in law, not what they try to do. When you even need a member of parliament for matters of other, let's say, criminality, that has nothing to even do with his work as a member of parliament, there are processes. But what they are doing, which directly follows their rhetoric and their promise that they will do it, is clear, palpable on the face that it's an exercise or part of an orchestration to intimidate the minority caucus or dissenting voices in this country. And that's why we don't want to believe that the president himself is acquiescing to that. That's why we are drawing his attention that himself and his advisors have to rein these young ones in. He's a very experienced politician. He's seen how these matters are best handled and navigated. But I don't think that some of the younger ones under him are on the same page with him.
Because there's a problem about the capacity of Honorable Ntim Kojo. He has stated 2 capacities in which he's acting. When it suits him, he's a minority spokesperson. When it doesn't suit him, then he becomes a member of the Parliamentary Committee and so on. Is that not a problem?
No, the two are the same. He is the minority spokesperson because, if I may explain.
If he's speaking as a member of the committee and speaking on behalf of the committee, it's a different capacity. If he's speaking as a minority spokesperson, it's a different capacity.
No, it's not. Let me please respectfully explain.
Okay, explain.
He first is a ranking member of the Committee of Defense and Interior. He leads our members on that committee. And by virtue of that, he is our spokesperson on Defense and Interior. I am spokesperson on the economy because I'm the ranking member on the Committee for the Economy and Development. So the two actually are the same. But what is instructive is
they
this.
Cannot be the same.
They are.
They cannot be. If he's speaking as your rep, your ranking member on the Committee for Defense and Interior and so on, he's speaking for the MPP caucus. If he's speaking for the committee, he's speaking for both the NDC members and the MPP members.
But he has not spoken for the committee. He has spoken for the minority caucus on that committee. And he is our spokesperson on that brief. And what is instructive is that when he held the press conference, he did not hold the press conference, let's say at a public political rally or elsewhere. He held the press conference in Parliament. He held the press conference in the name of the minority caucus on that particular brief. In fact, if you go through the full transcript or watch the video, he was clear ab initio that this is the minority caucus's position. When I held the press conference on the economy, clear that this is the minority caucus's position on this matter. When Honorable Abuaje Olua did a statement on the missing containers, he was clear that this is the minority caucus's position. So for all intents and purposes, this is the minority caucus's position. There's no question of capacity. What happened, and I'll be very honest with you, is that when the government actors heard him and did not hear any other voices, they mistakenly thought that he was a lone ranger. and that they could therefore just come for him and squeeze him and make an example out of him. And that is why yesterday the Honorable Afenyo Makin at the House, after we had negotiated, what I'll call a truce with the NIB officers, explained to the media that he doesn't work alone. If you are under the impression that any of our ranking members who addresses a press conference is on a frolic of his own, so you can do this to them, please be guided. This is the minority caucus's position as expressed through him. It is similar to the previous ones that have been expressed through other people. And there are constitutional provisions. In fact, yesterday we explained to the gentleman that what you are being asked to do are unlawful orders. And if you're a security official and you follow unlawful orders, it corroborated the initial prima facie submission that had been made by the committee, by our side of the committee. It even provided further information about things that had been moved from those aircrafts, but sought to give an explanation about what those things were. And number three, it undermined the government defense because about two of the major things that they sought to use as part of the defense in the rhetoric turned out to be untrue. In fact, I was speaking to a lawyer yesterday who said, me myself, I didn't believe that there was anything untoward here. But two things are now getting me worried. One is the inconsistencies in the government's defense. And two is this seeming attempt to cow everybody into submission and not talk about this matter. It's now rather raising more questions than answers. The government owes itself a duty of care to conduct that inquiry and close this chapter.
I heard Honorable Kojo say that, well, there's an air ambulance which came. There was no dead body on board.
Or sick person.
Or sick person on board. And there's no medical referral that we know of. Is this a sufficient basis for suspicion, Kojo? Kojo, you're a very experienced person.
I am saying to you that...
Can I finish? You're a very experienced person. Is this a sufficient basis? Are you saying that any time an ambulance moves, there has to be a dead body on board, a sick person on board, or a referral? Is that the position? Is this the substance you're supposed to be chasing?
This is the only thing he had said.
Let's look at this one.
I'm coming. But he said this in addition to several other things. First of all...
But this is a non-issue.
No, I'm coming.
It's not a basis at all.
I'm coming. Yeah. He said this as part of about 4 or 5 other things that he put together to say that this is what culminates in the suspicion. Mm-hmm. First of all, he talked about where the flights were coming from. Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about where the flights are coming from. The assumption that any time an ambulance moves,
and I'm saying that
it has to have a dead body.
I'm saying that
it has to have a sick person.
If a doctor says that this patient has high temperature, mm-hmm. and therefore just because of that high temperature, I suspect cancer, that doctor will be taking it a bit too bad. Mm-hmm. But the doctor will put it together and say he has high temperature, he has this, he has that, he has that, he has that, he has that, and therefore I suspect this. And that's exactly what the committee did. They did not just... I'm coming 5 minutes. They did not just...
I beg you. Let's...
You're my senior. I defer to you.
No. I mean, you are here. You have a story to tell. I'm only helping you with the story. Yeah. If the doctor says that the patient has a leg...
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The patient has a leg... Mm-hmm. and XYZ, and therefore the patient has cancer.
Yes.
That's a problem with the doctor saying that the patient has cancer.
And I'm saying that if
that's not a condition.
No, I'm saying
so
that.
Let's eliminate that.
No, I'm saying that if, yes, I hear, and I'm saying that if the doctor had done that, then I will agree with you. But that's not what has happened. The committee said that about 6 different things have come together to occasion their suspicion. It wasn't just about the fact that there was no sick person being brought in. It wasn't just that. They put a number of things together before they came to that suspicion. For example, the originating islands of the flight. 1. 2, what you just said, the fact that, however, that flight did not come or take any sick person. 3, about the fact that, as it is being claimed that some repairs were brought from their hub, there was no hub in the Gran Canaria to bring materials. 4, about the fact that the supposed aircraft that was bringing the ties, etc., did not even have, apart from the stretcher components, did not even have cargo holds to hold these spares and ties that they were being told was being come. 5, about the fact that the claims that this other aircraft that came came from Luanda, Ivan Falls. And that actually a second aircraft came from the same island into the Ghanaian jurisdiction, then rather went to Luanda and went to 2 other destinations there and came back to Ghana and then went back to the Gran Canaria Islands. And then around the same time, there was a second, that's a Kavok, which also came from the same islands in Luanda, or the same place in Luanda here, and incidentally also the same storyline that he developed the fault and the second aircraft had to come. They put a number of things together before they arrived at their suspicion. I'm saying that.
But the issue of this is a non-issue. That he didn't carry a dead body. It's a non-issue.
No, but that was not the only thing.
Basis of
that was not the only thing. They put a number of things together.
Let's take that out.
Yeah, but you can't take one out, just like the patient we are
talking about. This is a non-issue,
my brother. Senior, you cannot take the patient's temperature.
Anytime you see
you cannot take the patient's temperature alone as the basis to say that, let's take that one out. No, you are going to put all of it together and then come to a view. But for me, even the bigger thing is this. What do you lose? And the president said, get this thing investigated. What do you lose in doing it?
Why has the investigation not taken place? The president said, hold on. The president did not order the arrest of the honorable member of parliament. He didn't.
No, he didn't.
He said, these investigative agencies work with the honorable member of parliament and establish the facts.
Yes.
And the honorable member of parliament says, I am not working with them.
No, he hasn't said that.
So why hasn't he worked with them?
He has always said that he's available. In fact, even this morning, he's available.
Available where?
He's available to cooperate with the inquiry. But here's what is happening. While the president has asked for that investigation, his minister said that investigation is not necessary. They have information and that they will arrest him and make a scapegoat out of him. There's a major thing we need to recognize here.
Which minister said this?
Felix Kwachi-Fosu.
When?
On the 3rd of April, on Ekosi saying.
And it was positive. The 2 pilots escaped from this country. According to him, those aircrafts are still in Ghana. Who made the kind of allegations which Intim is making against this administration, against you, in the face of this clear evidence of the arrival of narcotic substances in the country without permission?
If somebody slept on his oversight responsibilities in Parliament, that cannot be used as an argument to say that therefore, Intim Fojo and his committee should sleep on theirs as well. That's number one. Number two, if indeed those aircraft are still here, today the government in charge is led by the NDC. They are not stopped from conducting investigations into it and dealing with that matter. Not at all. Number three, the fact, therefore, that today somebody is in opposition and has decided to exercise his oversight function does not allow the NDC to say that because we did not exercise our function in this particular way, you are stopped from doing it. Because when the NDC was in opposition, they chose how to exercise their oversight function. I have videos of my very good friend Sam George. Warning, Ghana Air Force flight number so-and-so landed in Tamale at this time. Over this, you come and tell us what was on it. We know what was on it, and went ahead to make some pronouncements. I have videotapes of my other good friend, Foreign Minister now, Blakwa, even putting out aircraft on which the president was flying. I was in meetings where people said, this guy is putting the president's life in danger. You never saw us send 20 BNI officers to his house, not even an opera. So people in opposition elect how to exercise their oversight functions as they did, but the government also has to be circumspect in how it responds. If you're a government and you send 20 BNI officers with guns to an opposition spokesperson's house, that he has said something that you even consider, let me grant you that you consider irresponsible, you are in the process of committing unconstitutional acts. And that is why yesterday we had to draw their attention to it. I believe that the president's original instructions are what should be followed, and not this effort by some of the junior ranking officers to be hawkish and to be intimidating of people who have views other than theirs. We have to be tolerant in this democracy.
Kojo, can you occupy, can you take a higher pedestal in these matters, given the facts that we know? The arrest of Chachu Chikata in church, the arrest of E.T. Mensah, the ransacking of John Jinapo's home, and many others. Can you take a higher moral ground?
I am of the view that any over-high or overbearing act by state security elements, whether it's in the MPP or the NDC era, should not be encouraged and should not be used as a basis to continue perpetrating it. I am also of the view that, and this is even to ordinary citizens, it doesn't need to be Sosu or anybody, to ordinary citizens. I'm a lawyer, I believe in human rights. Any of those things should not be countenanced. When and where to come and have a conversation with him. That's the practice that we follow.
Because when a member of parliament is aware of the commission of a crime, does he need an invitation to act?
When the president instructs that an investigation should take place and the investigative bodies want to invite a member of parliament, there's a process we go through. You write to the speaker, and the speaker will designate a date and a time, a place, will even send lawyers from parliament to join that particular exercise. That is the practice that we follow. Now, the government is the one in power, with the reins of power, with the responsibility of law. The government is the one that has to follow the law in saying that X or Y or Z, as part of this investigation, we will require you to come and participate. We have written to Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker always does it. He will first of all invite the person, have a conversation, then he will write to the agencies, copy you, and say, this date at this time in committee room number 14 or 6. We just had it. There were other members of parliament who the security agent. Why don't they want to do this? It is because they had announced publicly. I am. Please give me. It is because they had announced publicly that they want to arrest him and scapegoat him on the 3rd of April. And that is why he will insist on the right thing being done if you want him to cooperate with you. In fact, that is why now he's insisting that then do the full public inquiry. Because if now what you are saying is that what you are going to do is that you are going to interrogate him and transcribe it and come and publish it, what shows you will not come and publish a cooked up transcript? And so then he says, then do a full public inquiry. And let me say what I want to say for everybody to hear. Let me provide my evidence for everybody to hear and cross-examine me publicly. Because you have served him notice that you want to intimidate and embarrass him. And so do you think that he will subject himself to an indoor private process when you haven't even gone through the process? So, Kwesi, for me, I honestly think that the government is overreacting. What they need to do is just follow the president's instructions, just follow the processes. You'll get to the bottom of this matter.
If I were to make a statement which was deemed to be false about such an event, how would the security services deal with me? And why should they deal differently with another citizen? So, simply because the member of parliament?
So if you blow the whistle on a matter of this nature and draw attention to a number of things and you call for an investigation into it, you are protected by Act 720. If he as a member of parliament does it as part of his parliamentary duties, and bear in mind, he held a press conference in parliament in the name of the minority, raised these issues and called for public, that's part of his parliamentary duty. He is under Article 115 and 117. I didn't make the laws. Those are the laws that provide for how a whistleblower is dealt with, how a member of parliament is dealt with. And the government that has the responsibility of the operation of law
anybody
has
who
to follow
makes an
it.
allegation against the government is
No,
a whistleblower. That's not the definition of a whistleblower.
No, this is not an
but
allegation.
You know that that's not the definition.
This is not an allegation against the government.
Yes.
This is a set of circumstances which he brought up and drew the attention of government to go forward and conduct an investigation. He did not come and say X or Y or Z, you have done this or so and so and so. He drew the attention of government and said that these were the Feed Ghana program. The government is creating its own distraction.
But all of this will be impacted by the view or reality or whatever that Ghana is a narco state. All of what you're talking about will be impacted by
that view will only be formed if the government doesn't handle the matter well. If the government handles this matter well, that view will not be formed.
You think the most responsible
because the first thing that the government did was to announce that they have found $350 million worth of cocaine on our streets. That's what the government announced. That in itself, without more, has the potential of creating the impression that Ghana is becoming a narco state. And
that was the committees fighting against
with
drug trafficking.
Who are the persons behind? Have they been arrested? Have they been prosecuted? And those are the questions that the minority committee has raised, that these are matters you have to put together and investigate and deal with. And I'm saying that the government is at liberty to choose how to deal with it. If you overreact and deal with it wrongly, you blow the matter out of proportion and you create distractions for yourself.
Well, viewers, we are now taking a very, very short break. And when we come back, I'd like us to look at the inside